Hello and welcome to Masters of Divinity. I am your moderator JP, and I am here as always with Father Trump.
What's up?
And Amy.
What's up, everybody?
And Matt is not here at the moment, but he should be joining us later. I hope he joins us. Because, guys, I feel like, listen, I don't want to toot my own horn or anything like that. You know, I don't want to get egotistical, but I kind of feel like I chose probably one of the best albums of Music Mayhem. Whether you can agree or disagree, I don't know, but that's just my opinion, and I hope Matt shows up because I would love to have everyone present to sort of tell me how great this album is.
Yeah, you seem to have not only have you found a great album. I think we may have witnessed you discovering your new favorite band.
Yes, that is something that has happened. That's exactly what happened. A new favorite band, a new favorite album. I enjoyed discovering this immensely, and I guess we'll get into it. I don't really know what else to talk about at this end of the episode besides just jumping into it. You guys just want to jump in?
Well, one thing obviously, I would think that our viewers and listeners would know what you're talking about, but you have not actually named the album yet.
Oh, the name of
for all they know, you could be talking about Power Man 5000's Tonight the Stars Fall.
Talking about Baby One More Time or Britney Spears. Who else? Best album ever made, guys. Come on. The Enemy loved it. No, we're talking about Definitely Maybe, the debut album of Oasis, British band that you probably know from Wonderwall, right? Which is a meme now.
Which is, it's one of those songs that is very frequently drunkenly sung in bars.
If you haven't heard of Oasis.
Listen, I've got £87 million in the bank. I've got a Rolls Royce. I've got 3 stalkers. I'm about to go on the board at Manchester City. I'm part of the greatest band in the world. Am I happy with that? No, I'm not! I want more!
Oasis were an English rock band formed in Manchester in 1991. Developed from an earlier group, The Rain, the band originally consisted of Liam Gallagher on lead vocals and tambourine, Paul Bonehead Arthurs on guitar, Paul Giggsy McGeegan, and Tony McCarroll. Upon returning to Manchester, Liam's older brother, Noel Gallagher, joined as a 5th member, which formed the band's core and settled lineup. In May 1993, the band heard that a record executive from Creation Records would be scouting for talent at King Tut's in Glasgow. Together, they found the money to hire a van and make the 6-hour journey where they played a 4-song set that impressed Creation founder Alan McGee.
Band come on stage and I sort of stood here with my kid sister Susan, and I was pretty drunk. I'd had by this point about 4 or 5 double Jack Daniels and Coke, so I was a bit wavery, you know. They came on stage and they played one song and it was great, but I was drunk and I was drugged and I thought, oh, it's probably because I'm drinking and taking drugs. And then they played 2 and I thought, God, this is really good. And then the 3rd one, it was I'm going to do it.
McGee then took the live demonstration tape to Sony America and invited Oasis to meet him a week later in London, at which point they were signed to a 6-album contract.
While Oasis are by no means a one-man band, creative control does rest in the very capable hands of guitarist Noel Gallagher. As the group's sole songwriter, the pressure is on him to keep coming up with those catchy Beatlesque melodies. And in typical Gallagher fashion, Noel's not shy about expressing his own musical tastes.
I don't think music should be clever or be avant-garde or artistic. I hate art in music. You know, all this pompous art rock like Sonic Youth and all that, sticking guitars in dustbins and, you know, and playing them with screwdrivers and that. I mean, f*** that, let's rock.
The album went on to receive widespread critical acclaim, with many critics and listeners welcoming the album's fearless optimism, particularly in an era of rock which was dominated by American grunge, which seemed at odds with the album, while also praising Noel Gallagher's songwriting and melodic skills along with younger brother Liam's vocals.
'Cause I just wanna fly lately. Did you ever feel the pain in the morning rain as it soaks you to the bone? And maybe I just wanna fly, wanna live, but don't wanna die.
Keith Cameron of Enemy called Noel Gallagher a pop craftsman in the classic tradition and a master of his trade. The only equivocal thing about Definitely Maybe is its title. Everything else screams certainty. The fact is that too much heartfelt emotion, ingenious belief, and patent songwriting savvy rushes through the debut Oasis album for it to be the work of a bunch of wind-up merchants. It's like opening your bedroom curtains one morning and discovering that some f***ers built the Taj Mahal in your back garden and then filled it with your favorite flavor of Angel Delight. Yeah, that good. I guess Angel Delight is a British thing. I don't know what that is.
Is it like Turkish delight?
I don't know. Maybe it's like angel cake, right? I don't know.
Hey, something we have not done in a while on this show.
What?
Let's figure it out.
Let's figure it out. What is Angel Delight?
All right.
Are you...
I'm pulling up the Wikipedia machine. Angel Delight, also known as Angel's Delight, is a powdered dessert product produced in the United Kingdom. It is designed to be mixed and whisked with milk to create a mousse-like sweet dessert. Okay, it was released in 1967 by the Birds Company in a strawberries and cream flavor.
So I'm guessing it's pretty good, right? Is that yeah? Okay.
It featured strongly in Wallace and Gromit, and that's what made it very popular in the 90s, 80s and 90s.
Well, that's how good Definitely Maybe is. Definitely Maybe
it's as good as an obscure British dessert.
Yeah. Definitely Maybe was an immediate commercial success in the United Kingdom, having followed on the heels of the singles Supersonic, Shaker Maker, and Live Forever. The album went straight to number 1 in the UK albums chart and became the fastest-selling debut album in the UK at the time. It went on to be certified 7 times platinum, which is 2.1 million plus in sales. Definitely Maybe marked the beginning of Oasis' success in the United States, selling over 1 million copies, despite only peaking at 58 on the Billboard 200. The album went on to sell over 8 million copies worldwide and brought widespread critical acclaim. Definitely Maybe helped to spur a revitalization in British pop music in the 1990s and was embraced by critics for optimistic themes and supposed rejection of the grunge music of the time. The album is regarded as a seminal entry of the britpop scene and has appeared in many publications' lists of the greatest albums of all time. In 2006, the Enemy conducted a readers' poll in which Definitely Maybe was voted the greatest album of all time. I think I picked a winner is what I'm saying here. I think, if we had like a best of Music Mayhem, just saying,
I don't know. You're competing with rumor. You're trying to compete with rumors here, man.
And the Beatles, I know. I was, and Chris Cornell and everything. Okay, so
Paul Simon.
Yeah. All right. So since this is my episode and it's my album, I'm gonna go into why I chose this album and my relationship with Oasis. So my relationship with Oasis and Definitely Maybe is about. Let's say 3 weeks old. I've never been a fan of Oasis. I always kind of sort of wrote them off as sort of like dad rock, something along the lines of like U2 or Coldplay, And I know how people feel about U2. But that's just my personal opinion.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I really want to find out why you thought they were dad rock.
I think it just, I don't know. When I hear Champagne Supernova and Wonderwall, to me, those songs are, I think are very different from like what's on this album.
I think it's mostly because they played those artists more so on VH1 than MTV.
I think
and that right. Like did something to us. Like if it was on VH1, weightier than MTV.
Yeah. And
see, because the thing for me is I mean, maybe it was on VH1, I don't remember, but I remember as a kid, every time the Wonderwall video came on, I was like super excited. I loved that song. And maybe I'm just a sucker for dad rock. I don't know, but I don't know. I'll talk about my relationship with Oasis in a little bit, but
I don't think it's dad rock now. I don't think it
right.
is. I mean,
right.
Even those songs.
I mean, it's just a fascinating thing to me that like based off of those two songs, I guess I could see if that's how you thought their entire sound was.
Yeah,
I could see where you're going with it. It's because me being like knowing all three of those bands you just described, I'm like. Oasis is nothing like them. I mean, know that now. Yeah, it's like it's just kind of funny to me that's.
Yeah,
that's
it just shows you the familiarity I had with them, which was like nothing, just those two songs. And also, like I remember when Champagne Supernova came out. That's what I was like really obsessed with MTV at that age. And I just remember seeing Liam Gallagher, and he looks in that video with his beard. He looks 30 years older than he actually is. I think he's only like in his 20s, like his early 20s in that video. He looks like he's like 50. And I don't know. I just always assumed that it was like, yeah, this is dad rock. But no, I was wrong. The point is I was wrong. Yeah. Okay. I follow this video essayist. His name is Patrick H. Williams. Everyone should go out and watch his videos. He talks about movies. He's also a filmmaker. His videos are great. And he did a video on music biopics and why they're not very good. And in the video, he talked about like his sort of dream biopic. If he were to make one, he would make one about Oasis. And this is kind of like the first time I ever heard anyone talk like real kind of fondly about Oasis. He's kind of told their story. He talked about why he's such a huge fan of their music. And one thing that kind of stuck out to me, he talked about their Unplugged event where like Liam Gallagher couldn't sing, and so he just like walked off, and then it left Noel by himself to do everything by himself, to both do the lyrics and the guitars. Mm-hmm. And then Liam got drunk and went to hang out in the balcony and just started heckling him for the rest of the episode.
No.
It was a beautiful. It was. I watched that.
Really.
And
oh my God.
yes, and it was one of those few times when I was watching MTV as a kid when I could. That I got to witness something that I was like, that's music history. Like I'm seeing something historical happen right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was that was what really grabbed me. I was like, okay, these two are awesome. Because not only it was hilarious that it was heckling him, also kind of like it's kind of a dick move on his part. But at the same time, Noel like still kept his composure and just kind of went with it. And it's because they're brothers, so he's used to it, right?
Yeah, to a degree.
But like he kept his head and he still delivered like a really great performance, even though Liam is just being an a-hole. So that grabbed me. I'm like, these guys probably have an interesting story. And so I just kind of went through their discography. And, of course, I was familiar with Wonderwall and Champagne Supernova. But it was their first album that really grabbed me because it was so raw. And it was so like what I feel like is so what I like the most in terms of like rock and roll. Everything is so in the moment, and it was made when they were like nobodies and they had nothing, and like they're recording in these horrible dingy studios, and they had no idea they're like the next day they were going to be like legendary rock stars. They're just kids making music. So and then I just kind of gained like a whole new respect for the band, and they kind of became a favorite band, like you said, Chuck. And then I found out they broke up 10 years ago, and I'm like, oh well, okay. I had this penchant for getting a favorite band after either one of the lead singers died or the band is broken up. So I'll never get to see them.
That's my thing too. That's
really?
my thing too. Yeah, you don't get to see him live. Sorry.
Oh well. Liam Gallagher is coming out with a solo side project, or solo project. So we'll see how that goes. So that's my relationship with the album. Why I chose it for Music Mayhem. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that, like, I won't lie. I felt a little. I'm not trying to get like serious about it, so I'm trying to think of a more lighthearted way to put it. I felt a little, I don't know. Like I feel like last year I had failed Music Mayhem by picking an album that was so divisive. And I know like the point of Music Mayhem isn't to like everyone be pleased. The point of it is just to kind of go on a journey and experience and give our thoughts, and that's it. But you know, Foo Fighters was like a last year I chose The Color and the Shape by Foo Fighters, and you know it's something that meant a lot to me, and I love like all the songs, and I could speak about every single song on that album. But that's just because I'm a fan, and it kind of was sort of a lesson in that, like, just because like something means a lot to me, it doesn't mean it's going to mean a lot to everybody else. You know, they're not always going to see what you see, and you're probably not even going to be able to convince them. And also, Dave Grohl is Adam Sandler.
You've been harboring this wound for a year. I've known it. I've known that. I've felt it from you. I've empathized and understood that because I was the one who said that he's the Adam Sandler of music, and I know that hurts you a little bit. And what I was trying to say is that they make perfectly good, serviceable rock and roll music. That's all I was trying to say. That wasn't meant to be an insult. It was meant to be that they have their niche. And but here's the thing I do want to mention about that, JP. I've realized something in the past year since that, and particularly with this Music Mayhem. And I talked to you a little bit about this the other day in one of our own conversations, and that is I owned that CD when it first came out, and I loved it. I don't have the CD anymore. So when I was listening to Color and the Shape last year, I listened to it on Google Play. And I've come to realize that music like that does not translate well to the streaming platform. Right. Pretty much any rock music that I've tried to listen to on Google Play, because that's the only streaming thing I support or that I subscribe to, and it's only by virtue of the fact that I pay for YouTube Premium, is that. So the way streaming technology works, it compresses the file, and so it has a tendency of flattening the sound. There's less dynamic. So like all the instruments are kind of at the same volume, and so it just has this sort of a flat quality to it. Yeah. And one of the things, if you go back and listen to that episode, I asked everyone how they listened to it, and you and Matt both listened to the CD. Patrick and I had both listened to it on streaming.
I listened to it on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Well, but you also have listened to it a lot, so I think there's a factor there. I hadn't listened to it nearly as much as you, but I have found that this year as well, like I had a similar hard time getting into Audioslave because I listened to it on Google Play, and there was another rock album recently I was listening to that I just didn't like when I listened to it on streaming, but when I've listened to them in a more conventional recording format, I've liked them a lot more. So I think there's a factor there for me, is that streaming is bad for music. And I don't know if it really is or not, but I'm sure
maybe older music.
But I think that's a factor. And even with Definitely Maybe, like I noticed a serious lack. Like I had to listen to it pretty loudly on headphones to really kind of hear what was going on in the album. It makes me want to have the CD. So I think that there's a factor there in my attitude about that from last year. And so I don't want you to feel bad, JP. I think the medium affected the message, and that's an important part of this. So I will acknowledge my own cheapskateness for not going out and actually just buying what is a well celebrated and respected album. So
well, I mean, I think the point that the conclusion I sort of came to, Chuck, is I do think that for the most part you and Father Fun we're mostly right. And I do think a lot of my enjoyment kind of come from like a lot of nostalgia, my own personal attachment to each song and things like that. Because when it kind of comes down to it, most of the songs don't even really match anywhere near the quality of like Everlong or My Hero, like not even close. So with that in mind, when I was listening to Definitely Maybe, I had discovered that they were actually doing what I think Foo Fighters thought they were doing. And I remember in the last in that episode, I was telling you guys how I really respected Dave Grohl for just like wanting to do a song about his dog, or just like they came up with the title of the album Color and Shape because like some guy said he liked a bowling pin because the color and the shape of it. And I was impressed by that. And everyone was like, oh, okay, all right, that's whatever. But Oasis kind of do the same thing with their lyrics in this album. There are like joke songs in this album, like where they're just like, they don't know what to do. And so they're just like, we'll just come up with stuff, you know, it doesn't make any sense. But it's amazing. You know, it's great because they're Oasis, not because if anybody else did it, it was just like, whatever. So I think that's ultimately the reason why I chose this. A, I feel like I had to redeem myself a little bit. And B, I feel like this album better captures what I like about rock music. More so than who I've been saying my favorite band is for like over a decade. So that's ultimately why I chose it. And then my initial thoughts. So I think this album is a lot like Nirvana's Nevermind. And that isn't just like 2 or 3 hits with a bunch of filler that only appeal to an established fan base. I think there's something truly amazing in what we're talking about in each and every song. Well, maybe not Digsy's Dinner, a song about lasagna. But, you know, it's very much, like I said, it sort of captures what I love the most about rock and roll. And I think it's the idea of being in the moment. And like I said, you know, when they were recording this album, they didn't know they were going to become rock stars. They didn't know that it was going to be an enormous hit. They thought they were going to do okay. So when with that in mind, you know, when Noel is writing all these songs and they're recording all these songs, like the thought is just like, I'm just going to do what I like. I'm just going to do what I think sounds great. And so, you know, you have songs like Cigarettes and Alcohol, which Noel said, like, if I wouldn't make that song today, like, at all, because it's kind of like really inappropriate. According to him, it's like it's not really radio friendly. But like when I was making that, I didn't know we'd become famous like right away. So it's almost like you get like this spotlight shine on you as you're just kind of being really vulnerable and raw. And I think that's what I love the most about this album, is that it's an album made by nobodies that became like legendary, at least in the UK, you know, because I'm seeing all these things like it's the greatest album of all time. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts. I guess that's all I can really say as far as initial thoughts go. And I think I enjoy sort of what the album kind of inadvertently became. The story is like, things are really shitty right now, but they're going to get better. And I kind of see that in the album and what they're singing. And also just sort of there's like a simplicity to what Noel was doing. You know, he talks a lot about how, like, you know, you hear all these artists talk about, like, you know, they're inspired by like Pink Floyd's B-side track of this hidden album, whatever. And he's like, I just want to listen to Eye on the Walrus 20 times in a row. And he's like, that's my inspiration. And, you know, we'll talk about like the songs and stuff that I found to be really interesting, how his process, how he came up with some of them. And so, yeah, that's JP and Oasis. And now I think the more interesting part is I'm going to open it up to you guys. Who would like to go first? Amy, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So, my relationship with Oasis. So, my first favorite band ever was the Beatles. Yes. So early in my you know, taking music in and picking what I liked and didn't like, I just painted them with this like non-Beatles brush. You know, they were Britishy. They kind of like had the look. Something interesting too. So, how many members are in the band?
When definitely maybe it was 5.
5. To me, it's like these 2 guys, you know, and I just watched some videos this week and I was like, oh yeah, there is a drummer back there, you know, so it went up to 3 for me. So I don't know where the other musicians are. What is with that? Like, it seems like they're showcasing the brothers and then these other people are falling way back. Those early videos are so weird.
I just don't think the director knew what he was doing. Even Noel has said like those videos, like the Live Forever video, Noel apparently hates it. He's like, the guy who directed some of those videos, he just didn't know what he was doing. He's just like making it up as he went. So like, I don't know. I think maybe the director of some of those videos just kind of saw like We only care about Liam and Dole. So
right.
Which is unfortunate, but because everybody else involved is like really talented.
That was initial.
Yeah.
So now, a friend at one point early this month sent me the Live Forever video and was like, "Oh, I've been listening to this song lately," and he's a good friend of mine. He's just coming out of treatment for some lower sort of risk level cancer. It was like an early kind of stage with high levels of success. But he went through a whole process that was very intense, and coming out of the other side of it, he sort of like picked that song up. He's been an Oasis fan for a long time, and it sort of like shone like a sunshine like in his life, and he was just feeling like alive again, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So he shared that song with me, and then I vibed with it, and then I shared that song on Instagram, which is on this album, from Spotify. And I was almost wondering if you saw that share. Did you see that a couple weeks ago?
I don't remember. I don't know. The Instagram stories, I just scroll through them because I'm so OCD. Like, I had to get rid of all these red circles.
Yeah. So it started there. Then you selected the album, and I've listened to it a few times. My first thing was like, this is excellent house cleaning music. It kind of helped me like get in a zone and get a lot of stuff done. But I wasn't able to kind of go deeper into like the lyrics and the story the first couple spins. Got it in the headphones, and it may be some of like that digital quality. I think if I had a CD in my car, it'd be easier. So then I really sat down with it and actually read through the lyrics. And one time of doing that, like, you know what it was like? It was like when you're trying to like look at a Magic Eye picture and you're not quite getting it. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden like the whole image just kind of like moves out at you and like you're seeing it. And now I can't not hear everything. So I've gone on this whole journey with, through this album. It's good. So to me, first of all, the title definitely maybe, I'm a sucker for great album titles. Yeah. And that one is like super strong. And I think that it sums up a lot of what it is. Mm-hmm. And the way that I'm interpreting it is sort of like, it's that sort of moment of like hesitation when like something in life comes in and inspires us and makes us feel like we're more and better than we've ever been before. And we're like all in, totally on board, but then our doubts creep in and our fears creep in and we start to hesitate and pull back and we go back into that maybe. So it's that sort of like timeline in between our excitement and urgency and then like the pulling back of hesitancy and needing to kind of regain composure and reground. And so I think that that's kind of what the love story is that I see in this album, is kind of this guy, who has probably like big dreams and is kind of living in the moment, but his life kind of sucks, in a lot of ways, like it's uninspired and, cigarettes and alcohol, a little bit dirty, probably got a lot of dirt under his nails and sleeping in late, kind of, I don't sense that he really is super pleased with himself. But then, love comes into his life and he goes immediately from like that polarity to this like almost like delirious kind of state of love in his mind. And I hear that in the Live Forever video where he's like building up and he says, he's getting all excited that he feels like he's met his match. And he says, maybe you're just like me and we see things that no one else sees, and then goes all the way up and you and me are going to live forever, and he's like in this like high in the sky cloud moment. But what I feel like about this guy sort of kind of seeing that back and forth that he's jumping, the question is like, what of this can he really substantiate? Like what is real? Because like I do believe in the power of love, and I do think that this was a process of, if we're looking at this as like a story, mm-hmm. from start to finish, it was sort of a process of love awakening a soul, but then that soul needing to integrate, be inspired that I can be something more and life can be even more beautiful than it's ever been before, but then to ground it, into reality and like take himself and bring it into it, and at the end of the story, like I think that the truth of what can be substantiated in that in between, the idealism of all we can be in love down to like our nitty gritty human selves with our bad habits and farts and bad breath in the morning. You know what I mean? It's somewhere in between. It's somewhere in between. There is the truth. So that's the journey I went on.
That's interesting. It's interesting that you talk about it as sort of like some of the songs are about like relationships. One song that I thought was about like being in love turned out to be like they were just tripping on acid and they don't know how to describe it.
Interesting.
Which is Columbia. But I don't know. I think there is something there because, like you said, it's kind of about this guy sort of like kind of dingy life, and I mean that's the life they were living, right? Like that, and Noel has said like that. The album's about basically just drinking and dating and doing drugs. Like that's the music. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when they got more popular, they learned to like behave better, probably, and that's why the album was so good. It's because they were pre-behaving. You don't think so?
Well, no. I think Noel was probably behaving. Yeah.
Yeah, Noel was definitely behaving. Liam was never behaving.
Bad boy.
He's famous for his sins. Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I really like that interpretation. It's really cool. Father Chuck, I am so interested in hear what you have to say.
So a couple of things. So I'll talk a little bit about my relationship with Oasis because I was surprised when you picked this because I was just like, oh yeah, JP's picking Oasis, and then when it was definitely Maybe, I was like, not What's the Story, Morning Glory, which is their most famous album. So as I mentioned earlier, I watched a lot of MTV in secret. I grew as we all did growing up in a very similar kind of Christian environment where MTV was not allowed. So I would watch a fair bit of MTV, like when my mom would nap on Sunday afternoons. I would have it on low volume. Actually, I got busted. I think I've shared this story before, but I got busted watching MTV in the middle of, I think it was Lollapalooza. It was either Lollapalooza or Woodstock 96. It was Woodstock 96. I was watching, and it was during when Gavin Rossdale played "Glycerine in the Rain" by himself, which is this is the other time, Amy, where like I realized I was watching history happen in front of me, and one of the most powerful and beautiful performances because he could have been struck by lightning and killed at any moment while playing the song.
The microphone would have electrocuted him.
Yeah, it was, or his own guitar. Yeah. And it was like kind of in the middle of that performance or right after it. My mom came out of the bedroom and is like, "What?"
Worth it.
But yeah. But so during the summer, so mom, you know a lot of this stuff now. My mom, who's a very faithful listener to this podcast. When she would go to work in the summers and I would stay home during the day, I would watch MTV like all day long. Like that's just what I did pretty much. Is wake up late, watch MTV, make myself lunch and all this because I was only child of a single mom, so she worked and all that. So and I would alternate between VH1 and MTV. Depending on what was playing, and this video, the video for Wonderwall, was the first time I ever encountered Oasis, and I was allowed to listen to the Beatles growing up. My mom was a huge Beatles fan, so like you, Amy, when I first saw them, I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the Beatles. And it just immediately grabbed me. The Wonderwall video is an iconic music video. It's all black and white except for a couple of spots of color. Liam Gallagher is wearing little round John Lennon style sunglasses, and so it just has that aesthetic that immediately grabbed me.
It's funny because that turned me off, but it sounds like it turned you on a little bit.
It did, and I think part of it was because it was like a quiet sort of, if they're drawing on this sort of Beatles thing, like maybe like this is something it's okay for me to listen to. I don't know, but. I loved the use of the acoustic guitar in that song, and I loved the chorus and just the melody. I mean, it's just a very great, timeless song to me. Like it's just a good, just great song no matter what. So that was when I was so I saw that, also saw the video and everything for Champagne Supernova, and. Kurt Loder would come on and talk on MTV News and talk about Oasis from time to time. So I was just always kind of aware of them as like being like a big deal and being a well-respected band. And so they were artists. It was serious music. And so I always paid attention to Oasis. Later, when I got a car is when I started buying CDs on the lam. Like I would buy non-Christian music and keep them hidden in my car. And one of the first Oasis record I ever bought was The Master Plan. Not Morning Glory. I bought Master Plan because it has their cover of I Am the Walrus, and I love Magical Mystery Tour. It's one of my favorite Beatles records, and I love I Am the Walrus, one of John Lennon's better, weirder songs, drawing deeply from Lewis Carroll's poetry, by the way. And so I listened. So that was my first exposure to their music outside of the singles from What's the Story, and they were a much more like harder rock band than I expected them to be. Yeah. I expected their sound to be, because like the type of Beatles music I listened to at that time was like the White Album, like Rubber Soul. The Beatles is a little more like downplayed, obviously, than like their experimental type stuff, right? Which still has a bit of a clean sound. It doesn't have like a dirty sound to it. And so I was just surprised at that, about the band. And then since then, I've bought Morning Glory and listened to it several times, but I never really listened to Definitely Maybe. So when you picked this, I was like, oh, cool. Like I'll have a chance to listen to their first album and hear what they sound like to begin with. And so my first impressions of listening to it is that it's funny to me that they get compared to the Beatles all the time as a band, because they sound a lot more like the Rolling Stones. There's a much more obvious blues element to their music that has a lot more in common with the Rolling Stones have been doing with their career than the Beatles ever did with their career. The things I was struck by was the blues elements and even some country sounding elements, slide guitars and that kind of thing being incorporated in the music that for British rock is surprising. And so the thing about British rock is, British rock, of course, rock and roll is invented in America. It had kind of died out in the 1950s and into the early 60s, but it grew in England, in the UK. And so when bands like the Beatles kind of became popular, they had sort of filtered this American musical tradition into this British context. And you had bands like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones who were basically trying to do like bluesy type stuff, right? So Oasis is firmly in that tradition of British rock. And just like classic British rock. I mean, they're not like where the Beatles were going, which was, very studio oriented for a lot of their career and doing a lot of weird stuff. They were much more Oasis is much more in a vein of like, maybe not as hard rock as Led Zeppelin, but just straightforward as Led Zeppelin, bluesy, The Who, those kinds of bands, just much more in a solid, what we might even say like American sound. And definitely has that firmly as a part of what they're doing, is that it is very, very much a rock and roll record.
Right. And
not trying to be anything else than just straight up rock and roll. And then the last thing I'll say about that though is that in listening to it, I did have a little bit of a feeling of what people have talked about in regards to movies like John Carter or even Ghost in the Shell, like the remake from last year, is that so many other bands have been influenced by what Oasis was doing at this time, that it was hard for me. I had to kind of put my headspace into the early 90s to try to hear what they were doing. Yeah. Because I realized, and I think I mentioned this on an Instagram comment to you, that like I realized listening to this, how many of the early 2000s rock bands, particularly British rock bands I listened to, were basically just aping what Oasis was doing in their time period. Like I could hear elements of like Franz Ferdinand, the music, even like the Killers, which I was American, but like the Killers, and even a little bit more electronic, but like the Bravery. Basically, any band from the early 2000s that you could imagine that the members were wearing, where they're kind of wearing suits on stage.
Yeah.
Are kind of ripping off what Oasis was doing at this time period, and which really, like, in its moment, in its context, is significant, because up at that point, right, like everyone was worried about grunge. Everybody wanted to know who's the next Nirvana, like who's they're gonna be the next Pearl Jam, or they're gonna be the next this, or gonna be the next that, and here comes this band that is not they have a grungy element to what they are, but they're not trying to, like, they're not as punk influenced as like Nirvana. They're more blues influenced, which again puts them in more of a stylistic footing with bands like The Who.
I think there's some Sex Pistols in them though.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like when we get to is it Up in the or Supersonic? Which one? Or Up in the Sky? One of them is like really a punk rocky song. I'll have to go through it again. But yeah, there is some of that there. I won't deny that, because it's they're kind of pulling in from a whole range of British music tradition, including punk. But I feel like their punk elements are not as front and center.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of surprising for the early 90s, when all the record companies are trying to basically they're all trying to find their Nirvana and push that out.
Well, at least in the US, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, here's this band that, on the cover, they're like, one of them's in a blazer.
Yeah.
There's wine glasses on the ground. Like, and they're in a London flat. Like, it looks a little bit like, even though their sound and where they were, like, actually at this time in their life, they're a bunch of dirty club rat kids.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like what we had been seeing on MTV at that point.
Right.
And for it to be as huge as it wound up being, obviously it was bigger in the UK than it probably was in the US, but that's a really, it's just a fascinating and just an interesting thing to have to, kind of put your head space, to kind of be in when listening and engaging with it, of just how unexpected Oasis was in their time period. But looking back at it, like, to me, like, it's the most 90s thing ever.
Yeah, it is.
they're so definitive of the 90s music scene, but they were at the time. I mean, again, like, when did this album come out? This came out in what, like 93?
94.
94. Okay, so let's see. Nevermind came out in 92, right?
Yeah, and it had been 4 months since Kurt Cobain killed himself.
Okay, right. So, yeah, this is when things are starting to get experimental, in terms of what people are engaging with in music. It's not all just flat grunge, but still, like, I mean, the famous thing about Nevermind, about Teen Spirit, is that, like, the week before Teen Spirit hit the radio, the #1 rock track had been Winger, had been a Winger song, and here comes this sound that's completely different. And to think that the wider rock landscape at this time had kind of very narrowly defined.
Doggy.
Big fan, big Winger fan, that dog.
It's like, hey, you shut up about Winger. Winger was the greatest band of all time. You don't know what that week was like.
But it's, but anyway, so those are my, I could keep going about just sort of my general thoughts about this stuff. And, but I will say that it to me, Oasis fits this important spot in between what grunge was doing in terms of music, in terms of popular music, and what bands like Radiohead had started doing, which is to get really weird, and out there. And so Oasis is in this place where it's a good bridge between those two extremes. And I like it. It's good.
Yeah, a couple things I want to address. The first thing I want to address before I forget them was you're talking about like how much influence there was, how much they influenced like a lot of like early 2000s bands and sort of bands around the same time. You're definitely right, because apparently, according to Noel, their lawyers came to them many times to be like, we could sue this band, we could sue this band, we could sue this band. And Noel was like, no, I don't care. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
So he never had a desire to kind of go out to it, because he felt like I did the same thing. Like, you know, that's what we do.
One other thing I do want to say about Oasis, and we're talking about that kind of thing too, is the pop culture consciousness of them in the mid '90s was that the brothers Gallagher really disliked each other and fought very. I mean, it was like the Police. If you know anything about the Police, I they fought. You know, the Police. All three members of the Police publicly fought with each other, particularly the Sting and Adam, I think, and so like it was just like a thing they were known for. It's like if you got them in a room together, they kind of hated each other, and that's the thing. Noel and Liam, particularly Liam toward Noel, it seems, hated each other, but they were in a band together, and that story about when, as I remember it, Liam being a bit of a diva about not singing, and Noel taking it on, and so Liam being really pissy about that, and telling him that it was a crap performance, and you know, like I think he threw a beer at him at one point.
He did throw something. I forgot what it was. I think it was like a beer, like an empty beer can or something.
And he like booed after every song, and it's, you know, and that whole thing of like, I mean, Liam's ego is so famous.
I know.
Thinking that, you know, that there's no way this band could carry on without him. And I remember like Kurt Loder and others talking about like, well, maybe Oasis actually could. Like, turns out Liam's very talented, and he's actually able to sing, and he's actually able to do. I mean, Noel, sorry, he's able to actually do a lot of this stuff. It isn't all just Liam Gallagher, and then really, I think it seems that maybe Noel is much more the brains of the operation.
Oh, totally. I mean, Noel is the songwriter and lead guitar. Like he is like that. That's like the heart and soul of a band, right? Like, and even though Liam is like he's his vocals are awesome. Like he is what makes them distinct.
Right. It's a relationship to the Who, right? Between Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey, right? That Pete Townsend is the he's the brain. He's the creative force behind the Who. But the Who needs Roger, because without him, it's not the same.
Yeah, I'm interested in Amy, like what your thoughts are on. I don't know if you looked into the Gallagher brothers or anything like that, or like. What do you think about Liam and his voice?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying the conversation. I kind of came here today with like more questions than answers.
Really?
Because I'm in this like fresh sort of eyes wide open place about it, because it's just not a musical group that I really know very much about. You know, I've never really dove deep with them. So
yeah, I'm the same way. You know, I had to like become kind of an Oasis pro the past 2 weeks, which was really difficult.
Yeah, that's what I'm loving about like the music Mayhem, and just kind of the concept of like, you know, it's like the benefit of like a book club, essentially, you know, where everyone kind of goes and has their personal time, you know, with the artwork, and then comes back and like discusses, and then you get to see like other levels of what's happening.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so let's talk about the singles. There's 4 of them, and I'm just gonna kind of go in order of like when they were released to the public instead of like how they're numbered on the album. The first one is, I guess, sort of like their kind of signature song, Supersonic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What did you guys think about that song?
When I listened to it, I thought that it was. I was surprised. Like, oh, I know this song. Like, that's where this comes from. Like, it was just because when I was going through the track list when you first gave me this album, or first picked the album, I was like, I don't know if I know any of these songs actually. Mm-hmm. And then I was surprised I listened to like, oh, I know this song. And Supersonic was one of the first ones where I was like, I've heard this plenty of times.
Yeah.
Good song. Really great song to introduce the world to Oasis, because it is very, if somebody were to ask me like, what does Oasis sound like, I might listen to Supersonic.
Yeah.
Like it's a good like through line for their entire sound. You know, I mean, like again, like, you know, their big songs are things like Wonderwall, but I don't think that that's really indicative of their overall sound. Like, because as JP pointed out, if you listen to only that and Champagne Supernova, you get this sense that they're a bit more of like an acoustic, like acoustic dad rock kind of band, and not really kind of a grungy blues rock band. Supersonic has that. Mm-hmm. It tells you that's what they are.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that one of the things that is, quintessential about Oasis's sound, and like you said, this is the perfect song to point it out, is like the way that he like draws out a lot of the words. Like he has this kind of like sounding like a cat. Like it kind of sounds like a meow.
Yeah.
I find that it's one of the things I appreciate about Oasis, because it is kind of like unique to the group. And at the same time, if I have a headache, as I have quite a bit this week, it's the reason I can't do Oasis with a headache. Like it does a thing to me when there's some tension.
Wow.
So.
Well, do you guys know the story behind the song?
No.
It's pretty funny. So apparently they were going to record the song "Up in the Sky" as their first single, but for some reason they couldn't get the drums right. It just wasn't coming together in production. By the way, they had like a lot of production problems while making this album, because Creation was like going out of business and they didn't have very much money. So they ran up into a lot of problems, but it came out great. Anyway, so they're trying to record "Up in the Sky." Drums aren't really coming together. They didn't have anything to record for their first single, so Noel just kind of goes into a corner and he just starts writing. And he says according to him, he wrote the lyrics to Supersonic in like half an hour. And then later, right after that, he just started composing the riffs and the chords and stuff with his acoustic guitar. And the song was written, produced, and recorded within the span of a day. Mm-hmm. And he said that apparently the demo version of the song is actually like identical to what was actually released, because they thought it was like so perfect. But the funny thing about like the meaning behind it is like it's all because he's just like in the corner just like writing. It's like just stream of consciousness. Like when he's talking about Elsa, I know a girl named Elsa. They were talking about a dog that frequented he's talking about a dog that frequented the studio. That's who cool. had horrible farts.
I love this because I do stream of consciousness writing every day, and I've for a long time like had my fingers crossed that eventually something will come of it.
Yeah.
So I like to know that, because this is a big deal.
Hey, Matt.
Hey, am I here? Oh, hold on. Oh.
There you are.
This is my very professional recording spot now.
Welcome.
You sound like you're on like a video call from the year 2000.
I'm in a tiny corner in my bedroom.
Can you see me?
I'm in a tiny corner in my bedroom hiding from my children who are home again.
Nice. Okay, well, all right. Okay, so we talked about Supersonic. Funny backstory. He wrote it, Stream of Consciousness, and it came out as their big single. The one after that is Shaker Maker, which is one of my favorites. Do you guys know the story behind that one?
I did no research for this.
Right.
I wanted you to regale me.
Okay, all right.
Your question of whether we know the background to Shaker Maker is making Chuck shake his head.
All right, so do you remember
I just want to point out the pun there. And now I got rid of Chuck. I've only been on... Oh, there you go. Guys,
goodbye,
it's
lady.
A new record for me. This is a new record. I've only been on like 3 minutes, and 2 people have left the podcast since I came on.
You're like our Liam right now. Like
it's what I do. Yay!
So okay, well, all right. So do you remember the melody of Shaker Maker? Da 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 da.
Oh yeah, that's the I want to give the world a Coke.
I like to
Yeah, so they use the same melody as that Coke ad for the song.
They did? That was intentional?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Because I was listening to that, I was like, I want to
okay.
Yeah.
But what is the song? It's I want to get the world to sing in perfect harmony.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah.
The one that Don Draper came up with.
Exactly.
That's not the original tune, guys.
So that's it, the melody comes from the Coke song, and the rest of the lyrics of the song are actually, it's kind of like all about advertisements, because they talk about Mr. Clean, Mr. Soft. I guess Mr. Soft is like a British thing, I guess.
Mr. Sifter, I believe.
Mr. Sifter. That lyric was supposed to be Coca-Cola, but they didn't have the rights to it. And actually Coca-Cola was just a placemaker or just a placeholder. And they were on their way to record the song, and they asked Noel, like, did you come up with a lyric to replace it? He's like, no. It was like, we're about to record the song. You know how many things? Like, don't worry about it. And then, and like they were walking to the studio, and they walked past this store called Sifters. He's like, got it, Sifters, Mr. Sifter.
Perfect. Can't let these things slow you down.
Yeah, and apparently a Shaker Maker was like a toy from the 70s that Noel had. That I didn't look up what a Shaker Maker was, but that's like a toy. Like the whole song is about like advertisements. And even though it's not really saying anything about advertisements, it's just kind of made up of advertisements, and I think it's brilliant, and I love the melody of the song, and I think it's cool. What do you guys think?
I just really love how he says the word "me" every time.
Liam has to like put a spin on every single word to like.
I know, yeah, he can't just like have a normal way of saying it. It's like you say "me," but I say "me," something like that.
Yeah, I think he said in the was it you that said it sounded like he was meowing?
Yes.
Yeah,
he does sound like he's meowing.
Kind of the same thing in the song.
Yeah. I like it. Just pop some cat ears on him in the video. I have this whole like story in this album, and now I'm like, did I just like make this all up? Especially how it ends, and I'm gonna let you do your thing.
Kind of.
But the last couple of songs, it is this kind of like back and forth. Like it reminded me of how Matt was saying that he'll create playlists that are like the chronological theme of events, and that's how I read this album. Like it feels like a chronological sort of
kind of like a concept album.
9 months of this guy's life, or maybe 3 years of this guy's life. Yeah, that's how I hear it.
Well, I think like Noel is so stream of consciousness in his way of like writing his songs. I think it's kind of like what it is a story in a way. It's just like
right, it's gonna
and way he's just like documenting his life, his thoughts.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So the next single was "Live Forever," which I guess I think that's like their all-time great is "Live Forever," at least on like the British charts and stuff. That's the one song that everyone thinks is like the best Oasis song ever. And it's I think it's great, and I know we talked about it plenty earlier because I know that you like it so much, Amy. Just some little factoids. Liam Gallagher doesn't know what it means, so stop asking him.
It's like Black Hole all over again.
Yeah.
I do.
It was supposed to open with "Baby" instead of "Maybe," but according to Noel, he refuses to write any song that has the word "baby" in it. And
do you think that's why he opened? Do you think that's why Wonderwall says "I said maybe"? Like it's like emphasis, like I said maybe.
I do think it's funny. Like their two most famous songs have a "maybe" in it.
I'd be interested, like when he's in a relationship and they're having a baby. Would he write like the song that we're having a maybe? Like he refuses to say the word baby.
No. When I said I refuse the word, I don't like the word baby at all. Like
I just despise it.
We're having a baby, guys.
It's the way people feel about moist. I just don't like baby.
So yeah, "Live Forever" is a great song, and I think there's sort of when Noel talks about it, he sort of talks a lot about the "we'll see what nobody else sees" is sort of the point of the song. Like it's about like when you have friends and you're really close to somebody, you kind of see the world. You kind of like try to see the world from the same point of view, but like you see it and like nobody else around you can see it the same way. Does that make any sense? Like is that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's part of like the bonding. I mean, we move through the world all the time and we see like lots of people, but the people we're closest to generally tend to see a lot of things the way that we see them.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, the music video, everybody in the band hates the music video.
Yes.
Which is funny because you had mentioned, Amy, that like you saw the music video and you were really disappointed or something.
Well, like I said, it looks like they shot it in one afternoon and they wrote the concept of it in 5 minutes. So they're like, especially because like it took like a minute and a half, 2 minutes before they really broke ground on that dirt. It was like the pitchfork over and over again.
Right.
And then finally they dug this grave.
Yeah, it's weird. Apparently, like the director, like was just kind of making it up as he went along, which I think kind of describes a lot of independent '90s music videos.
Yeah.
Yeah, the music video medium of the '90s is a very fascinating thing because it's
optional to a degree.
Yeah, but like you needed it in the '90s. You had to have a video.
Yeah.
And
but you could kind of sort of half-ass it as long as the music was good.
Right, and it's one of the things about like '90s videos is I love that we could, like, a music video could just be, we're gonna have the band in a warehouse with a single light bulb swinging over their head,
right?
Like as in the Gone Away video from Offspring. Like we're just gonna do that. That's
there's a lot of those.
It's like if your band hasn't done it yet, at least do it once, you know?
Yeah, or like I will put Counting Crows in like a gray room with a bunch of like trees covered in paper mache, and they're gonna do like that light writing thing, and it's a long December. Like there we go.
We get it. You're Tim Burton fans, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite '90s music video. I'm gonna say not my favorite, but like one I really love that's like so '90s is that Letters to Cleo video. What's that song they did? Is it Sunday Morning? I don't know. Yeah. It's just so weird because like you could tell like they had no idea. What are we gonna do? How do you make a music video? I don't know. Like, hey, here's a frog. Let's put a bunch of eels in a fishbowl. And then like this girl, she's like in overalls and she's just like in a forest, just singing like da 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 da. And it's like no one knows what they're doing. We have film. Let's do it. Or
like let's stick Jewel in a public restroom.
Yeah.
And we're just gonna have people doing things in stalls. Like that's.
Oh, I love '90s music videos.
Lisa Loeb is just gonna run through an empty house.
Right. So let's move on to the next one. The next single was "Cigarettes and Alcohol."
Love that song.
Wait, is that all of them? Yeah, "Cigarettes and Alcohol." So you love that song, Chuck. Tell me why.
Because it's so filthy. Like, just its sound. It is the audible, like, equivalent to being in a room full of stale cigarettes and alcohol. Like it sounds like a filthy dive bar. And so I like Cigarettes and Alcohol because it's dirty. It's a dirty song. It makes this band that has this kind of reputation now of being kind of a very like, you know, like, because of like Wonderwall. Wonderwall has just made Oasis. People think of Oasis, they think of Wonderwall, and it's this sort of non-offensive adult contemporary song now.
Yeah.
And this to me is like, nope. This is where this band gets their start. They are the kind. They played in grungy, gross nightclubs. Again, kind of like the Beatles. The Beatles are a very sanitized band for a lot of people these days. So the Rolling Stones. So people see them as like these, you know, oh, it's what my parents listen to. Like it's just sort of like, oh, it's just sort of rock, generic music. But they all got their start doing like, I mean, what is it, like Brian Epstein with the Beatles like made them wear suits because like prior to that they were in leather jackets and playing in these like gross, like literal underground German clubs. And Brian Epstein is like, nobody's going to listen to you if you guys are like this. Like you have to, you know, they had to put them in suits to sanitize them. And so we forget like the roots of a lot of these groups is that they were, you know, this is kind of the opposite of like what we talked about with NSYNC. Like this wasn't put together in order to like look, you know, like they weren't trying to be radio friendly. Mm-hmm. And
it's because they didn't think they would be.
Right. And so this song is a perfect reminder of those roots. Like this was not a group of people that thought that they were going to be playing sold out stadiums in a few years. They were playing a song about cigarettes and alcohol because that was what was around them.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. It's also their most overtly political song. Mm-hmm. Some of the lyrics I kind of want to point out that I really like. Is it worth the aggravation to find yourself a job when there's nothing worth working for?
Right.
You could wait for a lifetime to spend your days in the sunshine. You might as well do the white line.
Whoa. Yeah.
You got to make it happen.
Well, and it kind of resonates with like again, going back to the Beatles, because they get compared to the Beatles so much, is that it's easy to forget that the Beatles were these four guys from Liverpool that did not necessarily come from money. And so like on Revolver, they record a song called Taxman, which is like, it's a fun kind of upbeat rock song, but it's really about how like the Taxman is like ruining people's lives. I mean, and so again, like when these bands sneak these kinds of things in there, it's easy to kind of overlook it, right? And to realize, no, like this is music born from a particular economic situation and reflecting that reality and that, that sort of dispirited feeling. I mean, Black Sabbath is a good example of another British band that is really rooted in the very dystopian. I mean, there's of course a much more overt, the collapse of the industrial society around them. But the impact of that in working class England is still a big part of the rock and roll scene. And so for them to still reflect that again, it's easy to you think, this is a song that like white dudes sing, at the bar out loud. This is the Oasis is that band. Everybody's just like, yeah, I wonder, whoa, forgetting that like, they come from a very different place.
They used to be those people getting drunk in those bars singing this song.
Yeah.
The best way to honor them.
Yeah,
really.
Totally.
All right. I'll give a really quick, be honest moment since I missed my first reactions. Because I don't have exactly any specific thoughts about this song. And I don't mean this as a comment on the band or their quality of writing and music. I'm just going to tell you my brain sort of like nickelbacked this album in the sense that it all began to sound the same. And I kept realizing I'm not actually listening. And I had to like back it up again.
Flip this table. It's too heavy.
So it is not a comment on the band. When I did zone in and listen, I liked their music. But I definitely found that this for me was like background rock and roll. Like I want to drive to it and have it playing, but I want to drive to it and have it playing while I'm like, headed to work and thinking about, okay, when I get there, I got to do this. And I got, it's kind of like a good background. It's like if you had a literal soundtrack to your life, like there's music playing constantly, this would be a good one to put on and let it go while you're going through life. But my brain has merged all these songs into like one endless song, and in my head it's just it all sounds
which one
it all sounds the same. I'm sorry, I don't want to I'm not talking.
No, it's just kind of funny. Matt's like, yeah, it's good to have on in the background. Meanwhile, when I listen to this album, I lit a candle, I laid on the floor, I looked up at the ceiling,
Meanwhile, I just had an entire romantic relationship. All of the ups and the downs and the frustrations and like the
Well, I think that's interesting because I feel like the way you're seeing is just how they feel about drugs, Amy. Like I think they just really love drugs.
No, the last song is Married with Children. It's not about drugs.
Which JP, did you listen to this on the disc or did you listen to this?
I have to listen to everything on YouTube. So
because I didn't know if I was curious to find out if Married with Children was a secret track because it feels like. Oh, it's not? Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, can we acknowledge the loss of the CD means the loss of the hidden track, and that's very sad.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
That's true.
And it's not the only loss, too. But we all know that sitting here.
Yeah.
I won't open up that can of worms.
Okay. So let's get into our faves if they haven't been mentioned in the singles section, and I'm just gonna do it real quick. My first favorite on this track is Columbia. That's the song where like I thought he was singing about like, oh, I love this girl. I don't know how to describe how she makes me feel. Turns out they were just tripping on acid.
Okay.
And
he's talking about his love for Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
They couldn't figure out.
That's not one that jumped out at me.
It's kind of a funny story of that song because apparently like it's a song that was made specifically for the instrumentals of it because you can tell it has this sort of psychedelic sound to it. and Liam hates it because he doesn't really get a moment to shine till like 2 minutes into the song. And also they were just like, well, this thing is also just be instrumentals, but here's some lyrics you can sing. But like I said, when they were recording it, they were tripping on acid. But I love that song. I think it has a great sound. The next one that is my favorite is "Bring It On Down," which is I actually posted a few lyrics last night on my Instagram from this song. Yeah, I'm that guy that posts lyrics on his Instagram. That's the one that sounds like the most punk rock to me. That's the Sex Pistols coming through.
Yeah.
That's like that is just face melting, amazing rock and roll. And I love the lyrics. You're the outcast, you're the underclass, but you don't care because you're living fast. You're the uninvited guest who stays to the end. I know you've got a problem with the devil sins. You think they're talking about you, but you don't know who. I'll be scraping your life from the sole of my shoe tonight. Man, that is vicious. But that's also when I realized like this is not who I thought they were at all.
To me, this one feels like this is like his own personal self-critic.
Yeah.
When I hear this song and like read the lyrics, I don't feel like he's criticizing someone outside of himself. I feel like this is kind of like
self-destructive, sort of like hating yourself kind of thing. Yeah, I could see that. So that's one of my last favorite is "Slide Away," which is also like a super hard, great song that I just think is cool. Like I don't have anything deep to say about that one. I just think it's really cool. And then one that like makes me laugh and like I couldn't believe like what is this song doing on this album is Digsy's Dinner. I don't know if you guys listened closely to that song.
Yeah, that song is perfect. I mean,
what a life it would be if you would come to mine for tea. I'll pick you up at 3:30. We'll have lasagna.
Yeah, because it's like the simplicity. Again, I'm looking at this as like this whole different, because it's like, especially when we're getting to know someone new, first of all, a new sort of love coming into our life exposes new parts of ourselves that we maybe weren't aware of, we're kind of like opening up and blossoming. But yeah, it's like every day there's sort of a different version. And when you have some beloved out there that you're seeing yourself as a contrast against or a background, and kind of like bouncing ideas, things feel fresh. So Digsy's Diner?
Digsy's Dinner.
Yeah. To me, it's like more about just inviting someone out about lasagna. To me, it's like, it's the next step. You know what I mean? It's having been exposed to intimacy, having gone through the whole thing, the high hopes and the doubts and stuff. And then the simplicity of that next step of saying, well, like, let's get together and have lasagna and see where it goes.
It's just funny it's very literally about a friend they have whose name is Digsy, and they just think he's really funny, and he made lasagna.
Oh my goodness!
I think it's great. No, this is the death of the author conversation mixed with just like your own kind of interpretation, sort of mixing into one. I don't think you're wrong. Like I don't think it's wrong to divine all these things, Amy. Like I think it's actually really cool. But it's also like I don't know. I just think it's funny that lasagna is a lyric in a song. That's because I hate lasagna.
Lasagna is not the lyric of a song often enough.
I know. Chuck, what are your thoughts on Digsy's Dinner?
I mean, considering I guess Garfield must like it. I don't know. Lasagna.
Hates Mondays, loves Oasis.
I had the thought, but I was like, nope, I'm going to be the bigger man and not make a Garfield reference. And Father Chuck jumped in and stole my dad joke. That's fine. It's okay.
It's such a John Arbuckle thing to do.
I will say, John Arbuckle. I love Garfield without Garfield, by the way. It's so dark.
Yeah, that's creepy.
Garfield minus Garfield. If you've never if you've never read Garfield minus Garfield, check that out. It's like now. It is Garfield cartoon strips where they've erased Garfield, and it just becomes about the existential dread that is the life of John Arbuckle, and it is very dark. And the funny thing is that there's like they didn't like turn it. It's just John Arbuckle. But the since you're talking to me, I don't have any thoughts on Dixie's Diner, but I will say that the one song that I do really like that I think of is Rock and Roll Star.
Yes.
The first song on there. And part of it is, so I misheard the lyrics. I thought the lyrics were, the first time I listened to it, I thought the words were, "I live my life for the stars and stripes." And so I thought it was a satire on American, like, rock and roll, because it's a very American rock and roll sound. And I thought it was a satire about just sort of America. But as I'm parsing through it, I'm like, I still kind of hear that, because even though it's "I live my life for the stars that shine," not the stars and stripes, the fact that he's talking about getting in his car and driving real far, that's not something you can do in England.
Right.
Really? That's a very American thing, to get in a car and drive. And so I still kind of see it as rooted in a very American mindset that is it to me. I hear it as a British commentary and even maybe satire on an American mindset of, like, I'm afforded the ability to see myself as a rock and roll star. I'm afforded this opportunity to I can get in my car, I can drive and think, and I can have this imagination that that is something that a lot of people don't, and particularly in the world, don't get to experience because of the luxury of space and the luxury of those sorts of things. That, again, we're very isolated, individualized type people who can get in our car and drive, and we can be with our own thoughts, and a lot of that, that's not something you get to experience in other places. And so, like, the idea, I mean, just right there, the fact that the song references driving in a car, to me, makes it indicate that it's not really a British song in that regard. I mean, I just get that sense. That's something that I know British people said, that they're very fascinated at the way Americans fetishize automobiles. And so to make a reference to that, to me, makes it, and because they've gone through the trouble of really sounding like an American rock song with that, is, and
yeah, it's interesting. I think it's interesting that it's the first track on the album, because it's about being a rock star. It's about, like, I'm going to be a rock star. It's almost kind of like a pursuit of the American dream sort of idea, kind of fantasy thing, So I don't know who else wants to go in terms of, like, their favorites. Do you have any more, Chuck? That are your favorite?
Yeah, that was really, because we talked about, I mean, the singles were the really standout tracks for me. I mean, I also like Married with Children, but I didn't have enough time to listen to it to have deep thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'm actually the same way.
But I like the song. I like the sound of it.
The only thing I really know about Married with Children is that apparently it was recorded on one of the producers' bed. Like, they sat on his bed and recorded it at his house. That's all I really know about it.
On a quiet afternoon.
Amy, do you have any thoughts on any favorite songs?
Slide Away is my favorite. I kind of prefer it to, like, to me, like, I would say for myself personally, that's the best song on the album.
Which one?
Slide Away.
Oh, okay.
Slide Away. Married with Children, again, like, looking at it from my point of view of this, like, whole story, it kind of, like, polishes off real nice, and it's a little bit melancholy, I feel, like, the vibe of it, where, again, like, where I said at the beginning, where, like, the truth of this love story is, like, somewhere in between, you know what I mean? It's a little more homey and feeling cozy, but also maybe a little bored.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I loved it. It was a fun album. I'm looking forward to hearing more of their stuff. But yeah, I like that also, like, we explored that when this album was, like, pulled together, it was before they launched into fame. So that kind of gives us a fun picture of, like, who they were before they were stars. You know what I mean? Like, who they were as beings. Humans.
Yeah.
Dude.
And I think it's interesting because from my kind of sort of research into the fandom and stuff, apparently, according to a lot of fans, the first two albums are really great and people really love them and they're very much cherished. But, like, if you really want to, like, if you want to kind of explore further, like the way Oasis really grows on you is by exploring their B sides, like which I think is what the master plan is, right, Chuck?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's
their cover of "I Am the Walrus" is like all time.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I've only heard that one rehearsal run, but I should listen to the recording. Okay, so I think that's a good place to leave off. What you guys think? I think we've.
I definitely maybe like the album.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, are you guys going to go out and kind of like rediscover Oasis after listening to this?
My favorite track.
Yeah.
You forgot about me. my favorite track is Wonderwall, and it's when Ryan Adams does the cover. So
what are you doing? Why are you here?
I don't know.
What are you doing here?
Look, last thing I'll say, full disclosure, I text JP and I was like, look, man, I'm sorry. I don't think I have anything to contribute. I don't know if I should even come on. And he's like, no, just let me know when you're on. This is his fault. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
You come on here and you're unprepared and you just want to wreck everything. You want to wreck everything. Why do you? Yeah. What's wrong with you?
It's the wrong album. But anyway, but seriously, Wonderwall by Ryan Adams. Listen to that one.
No, don't talk about Ryan Adams on my episode of Oasis.
Look, Oasis did
what are you doing?
Covers of other people's songs, and they were. Chuck said like the superior, so somebody did a cover of theirs and it was superior. I'm just what is this?
I have to check that. I don't know if I've ever heard Ryan Adams' cover of Wonderwall.
It's one of my all-time favorites. It is the original Pandora playlist I started was off that song, and that playlist has been going for like 7 years.
Right. Speaking of excellent covers of other people's music, you all should check out. There's a band. They're a Korean American band called Run River North, but they began their career as Monsters Calling Home, and their self-titled EP contains a cover of The Killers' Mr. Brightside that is unparalleled.
Nice. Cool. Well, everyone go check that out.
And also check out Definitely Maybe.
Definitely Maybe listen to it. Like definitely.
All right. Well, guys, I want to thank everybody for participating and for all of your wonderful insights. Thank you so much once again for joining us, Amy.
You're welcome. Good journey.
And thank you, Father Chuck.
Well, really quick, do we need to share what's going to happen next for Music Mayhem?
I kind of want to keep it a surprise.
Okay.
I'll just say it's not over yet, folks. That's what I'll say. It's not over yet. But keep listening. Anyway, thank you, Father Chuck.
You're welcome.
And I guess thanks, man.
I'm sorry. I'm ashamed.
Thank you for joining
us.
I'm
in the corner. What else do you want from me?
Thank you for joining us. Listen again next week. Good journey.
Good journey. I'm off to go see Godzilla King of the Monsters, guys.